I'm wanting to start learning to tune my pens more than aligning the tines. I'm curious, in what order should changing each aspect take place? Does it go flow, alignment, smoothness? Could you get into a little more detail in the process from beginning to end of that 10-second process of turning a bad pen into a great writing pen? Cool. So yeah, I'm going to keep it kind of surface level here, just because I'm definitely no nibmeister or anything like that. I have messed around with some of my pens, but probably not even to the degree that you've seen other folks up on the internet do. I try to keep things pretty straightforward around here because I usually need to know how pens work as they come from the manufacturer. So other than some slight tweaking and adjustments, I haven't gotten deep into grinding and adding flex and crazy stuff like that. But the nature of your question here, Michael, is really about, like, if you have a pen that's a little out of whack, how do you adjust it quickly to get it writing like it should? That's really kind of the nature of it. So I can explain it. There's definitely like kind of layers to it, and there could be a lot of different scenarios going on, but I'll kind of touch on some of the highlights. So I have a few products that we carry here at Goulet, a Goulet loupe, some micromesh, and mylar paper, which is to a lesser degree necessary than the micromesh for this kind of stuff. So I would say if I had to rank them, I would say increasing flow is the easiest to do to a point, because really when you're increasing flow, one of the easiest ways to do it is just to kind of flex out the tines a little bit. Now you can definitely overdo it, so it's the easiest to do, but it's also the easiest to overdo. But if you have really tight tines and that is restricting your flow, you can just flex it out a little bit, and literally you don't have to change anything. Just on the paper you're writing, you press it out a couple of lines as you draw it out with some increased pressure, and you can increase your flow. So that's pretty straightforward, no real special tools required. The next thing I would say is alignment. That's where the loupe really comes in. So you can take your pen and you can look at the tines. You kind of look at it as if you're going to stab yourself in the eye, if you're playing the drinking game there, where however many times I say that. Go ahead and take a drink. You take a look at it like that, and then if the tines look out of whack, you'll be able to tell, because if you're writing with the pen and it's scratchy going from left to right, that means your left tine is down further than your right one. So you take a look at it and you look and see, okay, are these two things aligned like this, or is one of them kind of out of whack? And then if you need to adjust it, literally you don't need special tools. You just take your fingernail and you can kind of press up on the tine that's a little bit lower. And then you kind of get it looking smooth. You do it on the paper and see if it feels good. Honestly, sometimes tines will look perfectly aligned but feel weird, or they might be a little bit out of whack but feel amazing and write perfectly fine. Do whatever writes best and feels best. It doesn't really matter how it looks. It matters much more how it performs. So keep that in mind. For some reason, sometimes it just looks a little wackier than it actually feels. But still, it's a good place to start if you're ever looking at it. Okay, look at it, adjust it, and then go. I will say that if you're adjusting steel nibs, they're a little more forgiving than the gold nibs are. The gold nibs are softer, so you have to kind of overbend them and then have them come back. But it's easy to overbend them and truly overbend them, and then you have to try to fix them and stuff. So if you're starting out messing with these nibs, it's best to start with steel ones, not only because they're cheaper, but because it's not as easy to screw up. So that was pretty straightforward, doing the alignment stuff. Then if you have the alignments and you want to go there, say it looks aligned, but no matter what you're doing, it still feels just a little bit scratchy on the page, that's where micromesh really comes in. And micromesh is really nothing more than a very, very fine grit of, like a wet sandpaper. So it feels almost leathery, but it's a very, very fine abrasive. So if you take and you just, it's best if you have the pen inked up, or if you get a little wet or something like that, because the moisture will help to give it, the proper amount of friction and stuff as you do it. It's not completely essential, but it helps. So you do just a couple of figure 8 patterns, and especially concentrate if you, like I said, if your tine is off a little bit or whatever, you want to make sure it's aligned. But if it's still feeling scratchy in one direction, you can kind of just work it in that direction a little bit. Just kind of like hone it out just a little bit. Do some very, very light figure 8s. Change the angle just a little bit as you're doing to kind of round it out. You don't want to wear it on a flat spot or anything, but you really don't need to do much. Maybe 5 seconds on it is probably all it would take, and that'll smooth it out. And it's best to do it and have a pad of paper beside you, so you can do a couple figure 8s, write with it on the paper. It still feels a little bit, no. So you go back, still feel, yeah, no, that feels a lot better. I don't know, we're good. So that's that's really about it. As long as you're not trying to reshape or regrind or change the nib size or anything like that, if it's literally just a matter of it's catching a little bit, which is most often just the case, then that's really all it takes. If it's not feeling scratchy, but it still feels a little toothy, and I know that's kind of a fine line in between those, that's where mylar paper can come in. If you want to really get it glassy smooth, we actually have 2 different grits of mylar paper. This is the not as fine one, the rougher mylar paper. I mean, it literally doesn't even feel like an abrasive, but doing some figure eights on here just like you did on the micromesh, and then go back to the paper and do it, and do that a couple of times, and you're really in pretty good shape. And that's really about it for just the quick like 10-second thing like you got going on. So starting out, increasing flow is kind of the one exception, but alignment, and then smoothness. And then decreasing flow is much more difficult, because it could be several different causes of being too wet on its flow, some of which you may or may not be able to fix. Sometimes it's a matter of the feed is just really wet and you can only decrease it by so much. Sometimes it's just that the tip size is too big and you would need to grind it down. So depending on your situation, decreasing flow may or may not be a really possible option for you. But sometimes the flow can be too wet because the tines are too spread apart or something like that. Then instead of doing what you did in the very, very first instance of flexing it out, you have to bend it back down and together, and that can be a little bit tricky. So that's why I put it rated past even all the smoothness stuff. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can try to bend it just in place like that. It's kind of tough. Another little trick that you can do is you can grab your fingernails and go on the end like that, and you can twist so that one tine is being twisted over top of the other, and you go back and forth like that a couple of times. So you're literally like you're bending one up and over on, again like that. And what that's going to do is if they're starting spread apart like that, if you're bending them up and over, as you bend them more and more, it's going to get tight. Now you could overdo it and then need to flex them back out a little bit. And then pretty much you're really intentionally getting them out of alignment when you're doing that. And then so when it bends back, it might be like this, and then you have to realign them. You might have to smooth it a bit. So that's why I rated decreasing flow as kind of the most difficult ones out of all the things that we listed here. And then if you really want to go nuts, you can get into shaping and honing, like actually changing the tip of the nib. You can do that just with micromesh. I mean, you don't need a Dremel tool or some, motorized abrasive stone or anything like that. You really don't need that. That gets really aggressive, and unless you're well practiced in doing that, you could very easily just eat away your entire nib. So using just regular micromesh can help to shape a nib. It takes a little while to really reshape it, and you kind of need to practice and know what you're doing. I wouldn't recommend doing that with your brand new Pelican M205 Blue, but you certainly, it's whatever, it's your pen at that point. When you get into reshaping and stuff like that, even smoothing to a degree, you're pretty much going to be voiding your warranty. So just kind of realize that's what you're getting into here. And then if you want to get into like grinding, actually changing the nib size, then that's really even kind of to a greater degree. And then you can get into special things like adding flex and retipping and stuff like that. That is like beyond hobbyist at that point. It's really kind of a whole other breed. But hopefully that helps you out, Michael.